Hi everyone. Welcome to this month's update video. This is the update video for July 2023. Uh, so first of all, I just want to say thank you uh to a fan who made some artwork of Amy. I thought it was really sweet and I saved it and I'll put it up on screen and it's really flattering to receive some fan artwork. And besides, it shows that people are interested in stuff, and I'm just glad that you guys are interested in the project. So I'm just going to go over some of the stuff I did during the month. So most of what I did was writing. So I wrote 35,000 words for Sarah's route. And then after that, I experimented with a few things that didn't really quite pan out. I saw that some game jams were going on, so I started developing some sprites for some game jam stuff because I sort of figured, hey, maybe this isn't all about the silent column. Maybe I can make some smaller projects and sort of get my name out there and sort of allow people to recognize me more. But in the end, it just like, as I was trying to work on this other stuff, I was like, man, I wish I was working on the silent column right now. So in the end, I just said, hey, I'm just going to work on the silent column now. But I still got some good art experience. I'll put the sprites up. And after experimenting with doing stuff for game jams, I experimented with animating. So I was working on an animation of Sarah shaking her head and having her hair sort of fly all over the place because I thought that would be really cute. But in practice, I think going forward, animation like that, especially frame by frame animation, it takes a lot of work and time. So I figured it makes more sense for me to focus on the actual project instead of an embellishment like that. Because if at the end of all of this time I have only embellishments, then I don't have the project itself. Whereas if I just instead take that effort and focus on the project, then I'll have the project done. So I figured that was just a correct uh, prioritization. So, but again, it was a lot of experience. Now I know I can make animations that actually look pretty good, even it unfinished, as you see on the screen right now. Uh, it still looks pretty good and pretty smooth. I didn't have time to finish it, but that's just because I thought I might as well not finish it and just work on the rest of the actual project, the essentials, you know. And then I also, around the same time, I worked on a CG for one of the heroines. So as I was talking about before, which you may or may not remember, but I was debating on having the game with five heroines. So the idea before was that the full game would be 750,000 words and have five heroines. Um, but now I've cut one of the five heroines. However, I still have a CG of her that I did this month, which I'll put on screen. It's not finished. And again, even though I cut her out of the story, I did the CG before I cut her. So that sort of falls in a similar category to these game jam art assets and um, this animation is it was good experience, but it won't really end up being used in the foreseeable future at all, and that's okay. Honestly, I'm just trying to figure things like this out. So, and this is like my first real project. So it makes sense that I'd have sort of a learning curve and some time dedicated to things that don't pan out. That's just how working on projects works, especially when you're just sort of starting up and not quite sure what you're doing. But anyway, another thing I did this month was that I outlined route structure, like the story structure for the entire project, as well as for uh, Amy, Thydria, and Sarah's main routes. So, and I made some graphs here, which uh, help me when planning writing. And if you're writing, I recommend making some graphs so that you know what you're doing. I can go over some of this stuff. Uh, what you're looking at right now is just a general graph of the entire game. But I also, when I go to, for example, Amy Act 1 or Thydria Act 1 or Sarah Act 1, I take it in 5,000 slash 10,000 word blocks. And I'm like, okay, what do I want to happen in these 5,000 words or in these 10,000 words? So, something that happens in Sarah's route, for example, is that they go camping. Sarah and Tashin go camping out in the dark, which I don't know if I mentioned it in the Act 1 demo, but the dark is basically a perpetual winter because the sun doesn't reach it. And that's why it's the dark. So uh, it's a very interesting experience for them. And Sarah always wanted to go, and Sarah has powers, so they're able to go without too much issue. Um, and yeah, so originally I was like, okay, so camping in the dark, 5,000 words, but then it's like, as I was writing, it's like, okay, it makes sense for this to be a 10,000 words section. So just planning some stuff out like that, like having one or two events happen. It's like, oh, this, as long as something happens, like as long as they go camping in this 5,000 word block or 10,000 word block, I've reached the goal. And you can just plan things out like that. I might put some other examples up. Uh, and it really does help just for planning stories like this. So, another thing I want to say is that uh, I have cut one of the heroines, uh, but there is a fourth heroine that I don't think I introduced any of you to on the channel yet, and her name is Gate. I don't have a current visual representation of her, but I have some old sprites. I might change her appearance a little bit, but here are the sprites of how she used to look. So as you can see here from the graph, though, um, her section here is in Act 1, 60,000 words, as opposed to Amy and Thydria and Sarah's, which are each 50,000 words. And the reason that Gates is 10,000 more is because if you can see in uh, the intro is roughly 10,000 neutral, and then 10,000 for Amy, then Thydria, then Sarah. So I just figured Gate you don't even meet until her route starts. So it would make a lot of sense for her to have 10,000 extra words. That way the reader can get familiar with her and actually get to know her a little bit, just like they did in the Act 1 demo, getting to know the other heroines. So the way that Act 1 is going to work here is the intro, as you can see, is the Act 1 demo, the first 40,000 words. And then after that, you have a choice between Amy, Thydria, Sarah, or you don't get to choose Lisa here, but you have the option to not pursue any of the heroines. And if you don't pursue any of the heroines, then you go down Lisa's little path here, and then you go down Gates' path, and Gate is a main heroine. So, something I also want to mention, I think I touched on it just earlier in the recording, but yes, the game is going to be right now 52, I mean 520,000 words rather than the initial estimate of 750,000 words. And instead of being released in 3 acts, it's going to be released in two. And then after the 2 acts, maybe there'll be another release of the entire game as one unit. Another thing to note is that before I was experimenting with the idea of each of the acts being around $20, and I wasn't clear about what unit of money that was, just dollars generically. Uh, Thinking about it now, I think uh, I want it to be 15 USD per act, or around 15, maybe slightly more. And that way, the full game would be somewhere around 30 USD, which I feel like is a pretty fair price for a game of over 500,000 words. Uh, but I didn't want it to be like super expensive. I felt like that was like a little bit much having $20 per act USD. So I'm happy with this price point. Um, I guess another thing to note is that the short demo really was sort of just intended as a to tide you over sort of visual novel before you got the Act 1 demo. But now that the Act 1 demo is out, it is literally just the short demo, only longer, twice as long, in fact. So I'm keeping the short demo up for like historical reasons or whatever, because I thought it would be sort of weird to take it down. But just so you know, I do encourage you guys to play the Act 1 demo, as that is really the main demo for Act 1. In the future, I plan on, as you can see, there being an Act 2 demo, which could tide you over between Act 1 and Act 2. And if you wanted, you could also start with the Act 2 demo for some reason. Uh, I don't recommend that at all because, as you can see, you're already in the middle of the heroine's roots here. But you still could do that if you wanted. Uh, so just adding another option. Something else to note is that, speaking of demos, I plan on making more art and music and writing, of course, but I also plan on editing some pre existing, like, art and music. That is probably pretty obvious, but I wanted to mention it because as I'm working on Act 1 and Act 2, that is to say the main game, if I am updating any of the writing or artwork or music or whatever, then after a while I will release a demo for Act 1 or for Act 2 with the updated assets as you would expect. So, for example, I'm planning on giving Keith a sprite. Even though he's a minor character, I think I'd like for him to have a sprite in the long run. So, after a while, probably along with the release of Act 1, the Act 1 demo will be updated to include Keith being depicted with a sprite, because right now he doesn't have one. But of course, as I make one, it makes sense to update the demo so that he'd have a sprite. Another thing, lastly, to really note here is that if you've played the Act 1 demo, not the short demo, but the Act 1 demo, you'll know that Sarah is a little bit physically intimate and a little bit sexual. And I just wanted to clarify sort of what's going on, like what the rating is going to be, because there are some sexual situations. So, my view on this is that sex is a very healthy and uh, good part of romantic relationships, and it can really deepen those relationships between two loving individuals. Um, so, I do want it to be clear that if the characters are having sex, then I don't want to pretend that they are not. But at the same time, and that they're like the sex is going to be affecting them, like emotionally and as people, and deepening the relationship. But at the same time, I do still want it to be implied. So nothing strictly explicit, nothing strictly 18 and up, but it will be perhaps even heavily implied. So if you're not comfortable with that, well, then you're not comfortable with that, but it's not going to be strictly explicit. And that's really all I have to say this month. Uh, this is my third time recording this video. The first time, I was really hyper and ecstatic and giving sort of incorrect information because I hadn't restructured the visual novel yet. The act two was going to be starting in a really awkward way. It wasn't divided up properly. I was really ecstatic. And then later I was like, I want to redo it. Uh, so I tried doing it at like 3:30 in the morning. But I was so low energy. I was like falling asleep at the mic and it really showed. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna try it again today. So I think I did a pretty good job this time. Anyway, um, yes, please enjoy the silent column. Read the Act 1 demo if you haven't already. It's twice as long as the short demo. Any entry point that you want is fine. It doesn't really matter as long as you don't miss content, I guess. And if you're watching this in the future and the Act 2 demo is out, you should probably read the Act 1 demo first. But yeah, I'm looking forward to working more on these girls' roots. I guess I can say one or two more things. Um, Amy's root is going to have three main branches, and I thought that would be fitting because she's a little bit complicated. So I wanted her root to have slightly more variety. Thydria's inversely or conversely, I wanted Thydria's section to be revolving around like healing and a healthy like emotional relationship. And I thought it would be a good idea for her. Uh, as you can see, these sections here are like about 70,000 words each. I thought it would be nice if her section was literally just one kinetic line with no choices at all, because that way the one playthrough of Thydria is so like super long, and that would represent time passing while you and this other person are healing from your own stuff and just growing closer together. And the seasons are starting to change. I'm planning on having it change to fall and then to winter. And I also thought it would be nice to have no choices for Thydria because she, you, that is to say, Tashin and Thydria just have a pretty stable thing going. Uh, you probably aren't going to like with Amy. There's like, okay, what are you talking about with this or with that, or what do you think about that, right? But Thydria is a pretty easygoing, uh, like she'll love you and sort of go along with a lot of what you're talking about. I don't really think it would really branch off per se. And then lastly, here, of the heroines that I have planned out so far, I don't have Gate's structure planned out yet. But Sarah uh, is a forked, uh, her root is forked into two even halves. So 3,500 and, I mean, 35,000 and 35,000. There's just a choice really early on which is morally neutral. It's not like be rude to her, be nice to her sort of thing. It's just literally, okay, where do I go? Do I go to my house first or do I go to her house first? And that just leads down two unique paths. And I thought that would be cool because she is relatively the relationship with her, I think, is relatively consistent, but at the same time, I did want to add some variety because different things can happen with her. There are multiple like plot elements going on, uh, and I thought it would be cool for you to have like a route and like an alternate path. So yeah, um, I look forward to making some more CGs and writing these heroines. I'm especially excited to start writing and editing Gate and Lisa here, because with the old structure, Gate wasn't even going to be included in Act One before I restructured it. So now it's like, oh, I can write Gate. That's cool. And I haven't written Gate in a really long time. And uh, by next month, of course, I'll have visual depictions that are up to date for her, and I'll be able to show you guys her. Um, yeah, that's it. Take care, you guys, and thanks again for the interest. Thanks for the fan art. Thanks for discussing who you think best girl is. I think it's really sweet. Uh, and take care. I'll see you later.